You're good.
There we go.
Okay, it's automatically recording.
I gotta remember it's recording.
And there's no, oh, there is one attendee.
F-bombs.
Oh, great. I am going to make you folks hosts and log off, and you should be good to go. But Lori, message me on Teams if there's an issue.
Yep.
But I will. Who wants to be the host? I have to pick one of you.
Kim, it's Kim's show.
Okay.
I'm the hostess with the mostest.
All right. Thanks, folks. Have a great time together.
Thank you. I think he must know you're one of my favorite people.
Feeling is mutual. Okay, we are on.
So do we know if people are here?
Yes, there are folks in the queue.
Will we see them when they come on? I don't know how this one actually works.
Nope, it's a webinar. So
Okay. Welcome, everybody. I know I'm waiting for one more person who's trying to log on, but I will say welcome. You are at Navigating the Transition Between High School and College for Students with Disabilities. My name is Kim Thompson. I'm the Senior Director of Disability Services, and I'm joined today by Laurie Prince, who is the Director of Family and Engagement Programs. Is that right? Did I get that right?
Parent and family engagement. Hello, folks. Hopefully you've heard from me a few times throughout the summer. Certainly I work with my colleague, Kim Thompson, but my office is also here to help you when you have questions in general related to your students' experience at Seattle U.
So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can get the PowerPoint started. Oops, I need to play. There we go. Play from the start. All right, Lori, are you seeing that?
Nope. I am not at the moment, Kim.
Okay, let's try it again. Share. Screen sharing failed. Please try again later. Well, that's not good. Stay with us. We'll try again. All right. Lori, if I hit share.
There you go.
All right. Now we're seeing it. So now we can play it from the start. Today, we're going to talk about how high school is different from college in terms of disability services and disability law. We'll talk about the accommodation process, kind of some roles and responsibilities between our office and students. And then we're going to talk, I think, quite a bit about how to help you with the transition so that you can help your students with the transitions. And we'll round it out with some resources. In case you're Hawk, to help soaring. So disability laws that govern services in education change a lot between the K-12 or the secondary system and the post-secondary or university system. And access and the definition of access are at the heart of the difference between the two systems. Access in high school actually intends to make sure that the student has essentially the same experience as their non-disabled peers, with a modification of curriculum and outcome for students on IEPs and even some students on 504s. That shifts dramatically in the post-secondary system. Curriculum is not modified here, and outcomes don't change. University is not about providing the same experience for any given student. It's usually about outcomes, and outcomes that are necessary for the next step. Ultimately, we hope to a profession or to graduate work to prepare for a profession. So the accommodations that your student will get in higher education are really provide the same chances any student has to be successful or not. It's the dignity of risk is what accommodations really provide, because that dignity of risk is what all students have in every class. So accommodations are meant to give a student the opportunity to show what they've learned and know, the same opportunity to show what they've learned and know as their non-disabled peers. We provide access in my office, we provide access to all programs and services on campus, but curriculum is not modified. And the accommodations provide that access. And I meant to say in the last slide, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Lori's going to monitor the chat. Or we'll have some time at the end to talk about what all of this means for your student.
Kim, we'll actually use the Q&A in the webinar. So that Q&A area, I will keep an eye on.
You might have guessed by now that I'm new to the webinar version of Zoom, proving that we always have something to learn. So the difference that those laws provide, accommodations provide equal access, not equal achievement. And this next one is really the hardest part. The student must initiate the accommodation process. You can't initiate it for them, and we can't start it without them. So students must initiate that accommodation process, and we'll talk on the next slide about how they do that. But they are the ones who must reach out to us and make that initial appointment. And this one is hard for me as a parent, but using accommodations is a choice. Students sometimes come to the university thinking they're not going to need an accommodation, or they don't want it, or they had special ed in high school, they're not going to do it here. And so a good number of students we don't see until winter quarter because they've somehow made a decision not to use those accommodations, and then we catch them when they realize that they actually do need to use them. So that's a choice. It's a choice for every student every quarter. And actually each accommodation is a choice. So accommodation is a choice. And of course, essential course elements are not modified. How an instructor wants to give a test is not modified. Our courses are large and participatory. I know that you will have heard a lot about that through the admissions process, and those elements are generally not modified. They must be requested every term. We have a way that we do that once the student is, we have an electronic system. Once the student has decided that they want to use their accommodations for the next quarter, there's a portal that they go through and they choose, yes, I want to use my extended testing time in my English class. I don't need it for soccer skills. I will need it for history. So they choose that, and then they hit submit, and it sends a letter to the new faculty for the new quarter. They do that every quarter. And then this is a hard one too. Faculty members expect that students will be able to talk to them about their learning needs. They expect that they will be able to participate and interact with them and discuss what's working, what's not working. We expect that too. But we understand that students are in a process with that, and we are available to help students figure out how they want to say something to their faculty member, or problem solve if an issue comes up. So the accommodation process, there we go. The student self-identifies to the university and makes a request for accommodation. They do that through, they go to our webpage. There's a button that says getting started. They click the getting started button and fill out the information. And that's an application for services to provide access for their disability. It's not a particularly weighty request form, but we do ask that they put down, you know, their student number and what their disability was, what accommodations they had in the past, if they had them, and what they are requesting for the university. Once they hit submit on that button, then they will get an email with how to set up an appointment with us. They will meet with one of the administrators in our office. Typically, they meet with Rich Okamoto or Maggie Newman, the director and assistant director. And in that access planning meeting, some people think of it as an intake meeting. We call it access planning. In that meeting, they will determine what accommodations they are eligible for. They'll look at documentation that the student provides to us. Typically students come in with their 504 plans. We need the documentation that that 504 plan was generated from. So if your student has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, then we need something for the doctor that did the diagnosing. 504 plans don't follow the student from K-12 to university. That's always helpful to see because it gives us a picture of the student's educational journey, but we need something from the provider that made the diagnosis. If the student may have a neuropsych eval that we can look at, that's always helpful. So we will look at that documentation when they meet with one of the director or the assistant director, and then develop that plan together. And plan can be reviewed at any time and is adjusted probably throughout the student's time. Some quarters are harder than other quarters. Sometimes students have issues in particular subjects, so we might make a different plan for that subject. And that happens, they don't have to meet with us every quarter. I generally tell students it's better if they meet with us more frequently at first, and then, by the time they're a junior or a senior, they're just waving at us across campus because they're managing their own accommodations well inside of that portal that I talked about earlier. And all of that is available on our website. It's just, you go to the Seattle University website, click in type in disability, and our webpage will come up. And then there's that Getting Started tab, which has most of this information. So our role is to partner with you and your students. We're not able to talk with you without a release of information. We have a specific release that's specific to disability services that students need to sign. But unlike some of the larger universities, we're happy to work with you. I understand as a professional and as a parent that this is a process and that you're handing the baton to your student, and we want to help in that process. So we partner with you, we review the documentation, we talk about appropriate accommodations in the university setting. And then the other thing that we do is we're available to faculty if there's something in their program that is specific that's hard to accommodate. We support the faculty member and the student finding a solution. Make accommodations. And then, of course, we support students when they struggle getting them to different resources on campus, such as the Learning Assistance Program or counseling and psychological services, campus ministries. So we're the place that your student can come as they learn to navigate the larger campus environment. And of course, we're the place where they're going to come if they have testing accommodation or problem with note-taking software, or where they will sometimes check out equipment if it's a student with a hearing loss. We are where they will request interpreters and captioners. So that's the disability services role in a nutshell. The student has many more responsibilities. They need to meet with us for that initial access planning meeting, which we've talked about. And I want to say this is not a list for parents. This is what the student has to do. So it's really, really important that you think of this as the place where your student starts to take responsibility. They provide us the documentation, request accommodations for each class if they want accommodations for the term. And then this is probably the most important. bullet on this list, they communicate frequently with instructors and DS about how things are going, what learning needs, what challenges, what's working, what's not working. I like to tell students, if they come to us with a small fire, we can help them put it out. But if they come to us with a forest fire, we're all going to burn down together, because sometimes students wait until they're in too much trouble for it to be recoverable. And there really isn't very much we can do. If the student's not attending and they come to us in the 6th week and says, I'm sorry, I haven't been attending since the 1st week, the most we can help them with is a hardship withdrawal, because students have to attend to get the information that they need. And this is not this is a very participatory curriculum. Students are responsible. This one will, as a parent, this one's, you can't imagine what you're all going through. The students are responsible for scheduling appointments. They're responsible for reading their emails and tracking their own progress in class. That's really different from what they will have experienced in most high school settings. And reading email, we struggle with that here, because I think all of us know that students don't prefer email, but we are not in the place yet where we can text with students. So students need, all of the information they're going to get for navigating the university is going to come through email. Everything from the bill and financial aid to their accommodation notices to our reminders to schedule their tests. Students with testing accommodations have to schedule those tests 3 business days in advance. We test about 1,000 students a quarter, more than that sometimes. And so our testing center is quite busy. They have to, when they know they have a test, they have to schedule it. We remind them, we tell them at the beginning, but if they're not reading their email, there isn't very much we can do for them. And of course, they're expected to manage their own time. I think this is important. It's actually on the wrong slide, but everything happens faster. We're in the quarter system. Things stop and start in 11 weeks. There is very little downtime, very little time for a student to think, I'll deal with that later. They really need to deal with it in the moment, or we end up in the 10th week. No tests have been scheduled, no tests have been taken, and then there's, again, very little we can do. So students understanding that everything happens faster is really important. And of course, I've said this before, they need to be able to talk about their learning needs with us and professors, and they need to be actively engaged. What I don't know, this is for parents, but I don't know if there's some students in the audience. And if there are some students in the audience, you need to be actively engaged in your accommodation process, which means if things are working for you, great, let us know. If they're not working for you, then you have to come back and talk with your DS counselor about what's working, what's not working. This is for parents, things to remember. Our primary relationship is with the student. I'm the person you will call if you have a question. I deal primarily with parents. And we know that you have a lot to tell us, that you are the expert about your student. We know that there are things that you really only you can share with us. That's great. You can share it with me, but our primary relationship is with the student. And if the student doesn't want contact with us or doesn't want to participate, we will not be able to change that. So you are important, but our client, our student is the student. We need that release of information if we're going to be able to communicate with you at all. And then understand that this is a process. They haven't been at the university before. And university work is not high school supersized. It's different. It requires different skills, different ways of thinking. Again, we have resources on campus that will be very helpful to them in making that sort of shift from, in high school, 80% of the information a student needs, they get in class. And 20% they have to go out and find through projects or reading. That flips entirely at the university. They'll get 20% of what they need in class, and it's a critical 20%, which is why you need to go, which is why attendance is so important. But then 80, it gives you the directions to go out and find the 80%. But 80% of what a student will need to do will happen outside of class. So as that's happening, the accommodations that they had in high school may or may not be effective. There may be a different set of accommodations that they need. And so that's why there is often, it often takes a few quarters for a student to really find their niche, both in learning and also with accommodations, which is why we have to do this really interactive process back and forth. And then this is a hard one sometimes to hear, but participation in mastery of material is the only, as demonstrated by assessment, is the only thing that determines grades in post-secondary. Seat time and effort are really important, but they don't get graded on seat time and effort. They get graded on their mastery of the material as determined by assessment. And that is often a change from what they will have experienced in high school. So some things to do: be aware of the differences. We've talked about that. Start now. I know we're late in the process at this point. We did this presentation in June, but start now helping your student take responsibility. They need to know how to leave a voicemail. They need to set up their voicemail accounts and check their voicemail. They need to start reading email on a daily basis. It's all going to be their responsibility quite soon. So start helping them do that, and start helping practicing from a distance. I think of, well, it's on the next slide, I guess. I think of it. You're going to transition from being their advocate to being their mentor, because you can't do it for them. So practice helping from a distance, giving suggestions about what they might want to say, giving, helping them write an email if they have one that they need to say. And allow your student to experience consequences. If they don't experience it here, where are they going to experience it? This is a safer environment, and you're not going to be able to go to work with them. So allowing some of the low stakes consequences of maybe not getting the grade you wanted on the test. That's not an end of life experience. That's a good experience to have if your study habits need to be developed. And then just develop some realistic expectations, because this is a totally different experience. Again, it's not high school supersized. It is a different way of thinking and being. It's not a place that students always feel comfortable in. That's okay too. So do those things. Don't expect us to provide supervision or monitoring for your student. We have 1,000 students at any given time, and there are 2 people who are DS counselors, and then there's some other support staff for things like converting material, and there's a testing center manager. But the small class size, which is so good about Seattle, is not, Seattle U is not necessarily replicated support staff. So we won't know if they went to class. We won't know if they turned things in. They have to know that. We won't know that. And so don't talk for your student. You're welcome to come to the access planning meeting. I think of it as a transition, as I said earlier. So definitely come to that, but don't talk for your student. They need to start learning how to do that. And then don't look for curriculum or outcomes to be changed. Oops. We're missing a slide. There we go. So to talk about transition for a minute, this is another place where you transition from advocacy to mentor, coach them behind the scenes. And if you need to know how to coach them on a certain subject, you can call me or you can call Lori. You can also call the director of the counseling center. Like, how do I need, my student won't do X. And I want to coach them to do it, but I'm not sure how to do that. We can provide support for that with you. Find your student this is a process. I don't think my freshman year in college was my favorite year of my life, but my senior year in college was. So acknowledge their discomfort and help them reframe the situation if you can. That roommate that's really irritating them might end up becoming their best friend, or it might be that they learn something else from that situation. But if you can help them reframe something so that they start to learn to do the reframing, and then again, let them experience some consequences. These are some resources for students. There's the academic resources. We have a lot of them. Their academic advisor is actually can be more support. The advisor is not just the person who helps them plan their schedule. The advisor is actually the person who can help them navigate the system a little bit. So that's one really important resource. Our learning assistance program is phenomenally helpful. We also have a writing center and a math lab. We're available to students, as you might expect, and then individual faculty members. I will tell this to students when I meet with them at the beginning of the year. They are paying to come and study with experts. And those faculty members have to, by contract, have office hours where they are available to students. That is the place to go to say, I'm working on this paper. Am I marching in the right direction? Do you mind reading this paragraph? Or I notice I missed 4 on the test that I really thought I knew. Can you explain it to me in a different way? So that's the individual faculty member office hours, very, very important. And students, they just don't go, and they need to go. Honestly, when a student goes and meets with their faculty member, when that faculty member knows that student, the student will do better. They'll do better if they meet and talk with their faculty member during office hours. So it's really a must do. And then, of course, each college has an associate dean that works with students and their academics. So, for example, in the College of Arts and Sciences, it's Associate Dean Jennifer Coogan, and she can facilitate help in that college. Dr. Kate Elias is the Associate Dean in the College of Arts and Sciences, and those are also a resource for students. In the wellness and mental health arena, Campus Ministries is a phenomenal place for students to go. Not as the name might imply, it is not actually a religious center as much as it is a place where students can tap into their spiritual side. Wellness and Health Promotions has a number of great things for students, counseling and psychological services. The Student Health Center, of course, you've probably already heard from them. And then I've got health and wellness on there twice. But then resident advisors are the person in the dorms that will support students at the first level. Those are other students who have gone through a pretty rigorous training process. They report to an area coordinator who's professional staff. And so all of these resources are available to students as they start out here. And I think that might be the last slide. Yep, now we can answer some questions.
Yeah, we've got a question in the Q&A I'd like to pose to you to respond to if I could. The question is, my son and I are curious about the possibility of a single dorm room. He's decided he will try it out with a roommate, but is concerned that it might be too much for him. Is that something that Disability Services Office can help with?
It is something we can help with, but I want to put a little caveat to that. We have very few singles in housing, and typically reserved for, we call them medical singles, and they're typically reserved for the most serious of situations. But we're always happy to have that conversation with a student. I'm really glad that your son is going to try it with a roommate. I think many students who are anxious about that in the beginning really find they have a good experience. And again, the resident advisors are there to help you or to help your student if there is tension or if it's not working quite right. But yes, that's something we can certainly talk about with you, and at any time in the year. It might be that there's not inventory or there's not a single room available, but if a student qualifies, then there's a waiting list, and they would go to the top of the waiting list if it was a disability issue. Does that answer the question? I'm used to having all the people in the room with me, so the webinar format is not what I'm used to.
If I could just add too, I mean, one of the things that Housing and Residence Life does that helps students have some of those conversations between roommates about how they want to live in their room. You know, do we have quiet study time? How neat, things like that. Is they have this thing they call the roommate contract. So we actually kind of force them to have some of those conversations, and the RAs can help lead them through that. So if there's a concern about, I'm too distracted in the room because we never have any quiet study time, that's a good thing to talk about in the roommate contract process. So we give them a format to try to tackle some of those challenging conversations with their roommates so that both students can get their needs met in their living situation. I'm going to read you another.
And on the topic, wait, one second, on the topic of studying, true. Also, Lori, I don't find that all that many students study in their room because there are so many great spaces on the campus to study, including a 24/7 open room in the library that's got computers and printer and everything. So, I mean, there's, in terms of studying, there's a lot of places. And there I see, I finally got Q&A open. His concern is more about his need for solitude. Yes. I think there are also some good places, and I would encourage him to talk with his DS counselor about where some of those places just to be and be by yourself. There are some really good places for folks to be alone and have some solitude. But certainly if that becomes an issue, we should talk about it and see what we need to do. Okay, the next question. Go ahead, Lori.
Sure. In regards to having testing accommodations, is it only for final exams? And if so, does the schedule for extended time tests somewhat align with the testing schedule, or is there a chance it goes beyond the standard testing window? I'm asking because I'm wondering about how to make travel arrangements following breaks.
Great question. No, testing accommodation is for every single exam or quiz the student has. Sometimes students don't choose to use their extended time on quizzes because they don't always need it. But no, every test is, and they do align. We try and have students take their tests at the exact same time as the other students are testing, really in order to maintain testing integrity. So the only time it would extend beyond the window is if students have back-to-back finals, and then it might have to extend a little bit because they have to move one early or one late. But typically, no, we're done with finals. At the end of the day on finals, we're done. You might want to give like a 12 or 24-hour window in case your student has back-to-back classes, but essentially, no, it's all at the same time.
So far, those are the only questions in the Q&A. You know, if I could just support some of the stuff you said, Kim, about students really utilizing the resources here. I think some students come to college with, you know, some sort of idea that, well, I only use the services if I'm a poor student. I know, and you know, that the best students use every available resource we have to them, whether it's the learning assistance programs, whether it's disability services. That's how those students are most successful. And so the more you can encourage your students, parents to really access those things, all geared towards their success, the better they'll do here. I mean, that's why we have those programs, because college is harder for everybody typically than high school.
And when students are reluctant, I tell them you're already paying for it. You might as well use it.
True. Any other questions? Oh. So the question is, what should I have my son gather to request an appointment?
You should have your son go ahead and fill out that accommodation request form on our website. Really, the sooner the better. We're now in the window where appointments will start to fill up. So should fill out that application and just hit submit. If you don't have the documentation right now or on you, or don't let gathering it stop you from hitting that accommodation, filling out that application and hitting submit, because we need to start getting them in for appointments. And then, you know, it really depends what documentation your student needs to show us. Really depends on what accommodations they're requesting. And it also depends a little bit by disability. So for example, a student with a chronic medical condition like irritable bowel or Crohn's disease, we should have something from the doctor. If it's attention deficit and you went to a psychiatrist or a psychologist for that diagnosis, something from them. If it's mental health and they're working with a therapist, it can be something from the therapist. Our documentation requirements are on our website also, but basically the need is for whatever the request is, it needs to be a provider who's appropriate to make that diagnosis. So for example, we probably wouldn't accept a letter from the chiropractor about ADHD. That it wouldn't align enough for us probably. On the other hand, if your primary care physician has been the one managing your child's ADHD for the last 5 years, then we would take that from the primary care physician. They are also a physician.
Next question is, if the student has already had the intake access planning meeting and had accommodations determined, do they still need to request the accommodation for this fall, or does it begin with the winter term?
So this is the problem with the language, probably, is making this difficult, the way we call it requesting and submitting, but we've not been able to find a better way to do it. If the student has had their access planning meeting, they now have access to MyDS, which is the online portal. They have access to that, and they need to go in and request accommodations for the classes that they're signed up for. So no, of course, if they've had an access planning meeting, the accommodations start right now, but they need to go into the portal and say, okay, for my UCore 1100, I want these 3 things. For my next class, I want these things. And then they just hit submit, and that goes right to the instructor. So they don't, the student needs to get in the habit of, the access planning meeting's done, that's great, you're in. Now the student needs to get in the habit of doing their part, which is selecting the accommodations they're using per class and hitting submit. Does that answer the question? Okay.
You did answer it. Thank you. Yes.
It's confusing at first. The whole system's confusing. I don't know who was more confused my daughter's freshman year of college, me or her. And I worked in the business, so it's confusing. The other thing we have on our website, which can be really helpful to you or your student, is a virtual lobby. So it's an open Zoom room. And if you have a question, you can always call me, but I might not answer right away. But you can pop into the virtual lobby online and say, was my kid supposed to do this? And we won't tell you if they did it, but we can tell you hypothetically, yes, they should have done it for this quarter. Or your student, and this would make me happier, your student can jump into the virtual lobby and say, I forgot what I was supposed to do. And Valerie, our office manager, will go, oh, well, let's look you up. Okay, we can help you do this. It looks like you did everything. You're good. Or wait, let's go through this again. And then she shares her screen and they go through it together. So the virtual lobby is open 9 to 3 every day. We're not open earlier because students typically don't want to come at 8 o'clock. Just click on the virtual lobby link. It takes them right there and they can talk to somebody immediately they can make an appointment that way. They can get a question answered, but that's immediate. What they can't get that way is an access planning meeting. They can schedule one, but we don't offer the access planning meetings on demand. They have to come in and then we'll just set one up, if that makes sense.
Any other questions?
My information, if you want to contact me directly, my information is also on our Disability Services website. Foolishly, my direct line is right there, so you will come right to my office rather than a secretary, or you can email me. Both Lori and I want to be there for you because we are both parents and we understand what this was like, and we really want your Red Hawks to soar. I'm stealing that from Lori's presentation.
We do love our bird puns at Seattle U.
We do.
Great.
Thank you very much. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen.
Great. And to reach me, if you have other questions or can't remember anything from today or still have issues trying to figure out pieces of the university, please feel free to email me at parents@seattleu.edu. I'm the one who answers that email and the parent phone line. So, and if you're moving your student in on Saturday, September 16th, please stop by our family hospitality area. We'll send you some info about it. I will be there all day, and a number of my colleagues will be around when we'll have some campus resources available in our student center as well for part of that day. But we're excited to welcome you as well as your student to the Red Hawk family.
Thank you very much. Do I end this?
Yes, you can end it.
Thank you, Lori. Thanks for joining me.
All righty, my pleasure. We'll talk soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.